Hey there, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody. This is Kenny with yet another edition of the Yak with Mac and yet another very special edition. I can't wait to get to our guest. I'm going to take just a few seconds to give you my reminders. Leaders out there, leader ready. Leader ready. Have you registered? Are you going? I promise you, you will be a better leader after you leave there than when you came in. I promise there'll be several things you'll be able to pick up that will help with your leadership ability. Leaders, this is a place to be. This is where we want to inspire and encourage you to become great influencers. Remember, in 2021, it's all about influencing. You can't be walking around just telling people what to do every day. It is all about influencing. My last reminder, 15 minutes a day, leaders. Are you taking at least 15 minutes a day so that you are doing something that is going to continue and enhance your growth? Are you taking charge of your development, of your career? We're going to get into that with my special guest in just a bit. But leaders, we know you have other leaders that are helping you along the way. That's great. Help yourself as well. We have so many tools and resources. Percipio, Magenta University. There's so many great things out there. So hopefully you're helping yourself. I can't wait to get to my guest. And so I'm going to introduce her. We're going to just jump right in with her walking us through her career journey. So I want to welcome to the podcast today Katey Chamblin, who is the Vice President of Go-to-Market Operations. Katey, thank you so much
Thanks
for
for
being
having me.
here. Wow, thank you so much for taking the time. This is awesome. And so, hey, let's jump right in. Walk us through your career journey. I'm sure people are going to want to hear the roads that you've traveled on your way to here.
Yeah, well, guys, you know what? Good timing because I'm just coming up on 20 years
Wow.
here with
Yeah.
Sprint and
That's awesome.
T-Mobile. So, yeah, kind of a big milestone. I remember when I started, I thought to myself, gosh, I would hear all these people celebrating their service anniversaries, and it was like 15, 20, 30 years. And I thought, gosh, will I be here in 20 years? And here I am, still here at 20 years.
Awesome. That is
Um,
awesome.
so
Awesome.
I really started out, I was one of the college recruits that came to Sprint. And I started early on, in college trying to decide what I wanted to do. And for me, I really wanted to go to work for a big company. I wanted something that had a lot of different places that I could try different skill sets. And so Sprint seemed like a perfect fit for me, had an opportunity to come on board. Of all the places I came on board, they brought me into finance, which is probably the area that I want to avoid the most because I do not like numbers. But they had a chance for me to really come in and do some of their project management. And it was a great place to start out my career because I had a chance to really start to learn some of the systems, meet people, and it was really in their finance project management team and helping with even some of the reporting. And then as it progressed, I had a chance to go and start to work in marketing and really lead some of our segment marketing initiatives. Just when we were starting to launch, I think it was really around 4G and all the LTE capabilities, we started to do segment marketing. Some might remember the old advanced connected segment, people that were just starting to be really
Yes, I
heavy. Yeah,
remember.
with your iPhones, with your Samsungs. And so we were starting to really market to them. And then ultimately, I moved over into pricing and did some of the voice and data pricing, which was a ton of fun. That happened during the merger with Nextel. So had a chance to really bring the pricing platforms together and really learn that side of it and bringing the pricing to life. And then really moved over into more of a sales operations role where I had a chance to really think about all of the activities it takes to run a store, whether it be our retail or our dealer side. And, as we did that, I had a chance to understand all the different operations. And that's really where I found that go to market was what I wanted to do. One of the directors that was over there was doing go to market, helping launch all the initiatives. And I thought, how cool to be on the forefront of all the things that are going to go to market and have a chance to bring that to life for the customer. And so the director position opened up and had an opportunity to apply for it and was able to get that position. And gosh, that's about all she wrote after that. It's been 10 plus years now doing some
Wow.
portion of go to market, whether it be postpaid, prepaid, and then continuing that evolution into T-Mobile as well.
Wow. Wow. What a journey.
Yeah.
And it's a really, really important work that a lot of folks may not see behind the scenes. So I loved every second of that. How inspiring is that? So I want to ask, so I mean, almost 20 years coming up on, what are some challenges that you might have come across along the way?
Yeah, I would say, making the step to the director role for me was a tough transition. I think that was probably one of the most challenging in my career, really because it forced me to go from, being in the thick of it, really being a working manager, to now shifting gears and saying, okay, I need to understand a certain level of detail about a program or all the operations, but not do it myself and be able to think through what might I need from my team. It would take me a minute to kind of come out of a meeting, think about the activities our team needed to do, put up my thought process together, and then sit down with my team and say, okay, here's what we need to go do. Here's what I'm looking for. Here's kind of the construct, and then go build around that. And bring those elements back to us versus just going and doing it myself and figuring it out as I went along the way. I think for
Mm-hmm.
me, that was one of the biggest transitions I went through as a leader, and I would even say challenge because it took me about 6, 12 months to really kind of get in my groove. And I think also my team learning to work with me as a leader.
Wow.
Um,
Okay.
and I think also, when I was interviewing for like the director roles, one of the, I think, challenges I had on my resume was I hadn't had an opportunity to manage a large team. I'd only managed a couple of people. My teams were usually 3 or 4, just because marketing was a smaller organization. And so when I moved over to the operations, that was used to a much larger organization. And the
Mm.
questions I kept getting were, how are you going to be able to handle a larger team? How, you haven't managed a large group of people. And so I found that I had to really kind of overcome that in my interview process. One, I had to address that head on and say, guys, whether it's 3 people, 30 people, 300 people, I'm still going to apply these same principles about how I want to lead my people, what characteristics I'm looking for, what I want them to expect from me, how I communicate. But I also had to take some time to find some ways to overcome that and give me an edge in other places. And so, as I was going through that interview process, I knew that that would be something that was a weakness for me. But the director that I was going to potentially be backfilling had been in the role for a long time. So I took some time to really go and interview a whole series of her customers, people that she worked with out in the field, and ask them, what do you expect? What do you need from this role? What are you looking for that's the same? What do you want that would be different? And they gave me a lot of good insight, and I used that during the interview. And I honestly think that that was one of the things that really gave me the edge to help get me the director position, because they said, they really liked that I had gone out and taken the time to understand what it is that needed to change and build that into the plan that I brought in during my interview process.
Katie, you just dropped something that is so important, because I find this happens a lot with leaders that they'll interview for a position, but they don't do the preparation and the work. They might think that they're overstepping bounds. Hey, if I, talk to someone that's already on the team, hey, what are you looking for in a leader?
Yeah,
But you showed that that's a great thing to do because I'm sure you had some competition going for that
yeah.
position, and that probably gave you the edge, but it also set you up for some pretty good success because you had an understanding now walking into the position. I think that's just awesome advice.
Yeah, I think that's really important when people are interviewing that you do take the time. I mean, when I interview somebody for that level of a position, by the time you get to kind of a somewhat of a manager, but especially for a director, I don't want to spend the time telling you all about the role and all the details. I'll tell you some and my perception of it, but I also want to know that you've taken the time to go and do the research and provide me some insight to say, here's what I think might be some things you need. I don't care if it aligns with kind of where my head is because we'll get to that point. But I
Mhm.
want to know that you've taken the time and the energy to really think through that and do that research. And that could be, going out to the front lines, that could be talking to my customers, could be talking to the team. But a lot of people often don't take the time to do that. And I think I'm really looking for someone to come in with a plan. What is your 30, 60, 90? What is your long-term vision? What are the problems you think we have? Because maybe you can bring an insight that I don't see having had that position for so long.
That is so awesome. And I want to get into this topic with you now because I would imagine that going from the levels that you've gone to and now even from director to vice president, that your leadership has just continued to evolve and your brand has continued to evolve. Talk a little bit about that and what have you done to continue to evolve your brand and what are some things that you look for in your team?
Yeah, I think the personal brand is something that for me is really important. As I kind of look back at my journey, there was, people I probably worked for that I love. And then there's been people I work for that I'm like, gosh, some of their characteristics I don't love. I don't mesh as well with them. And
Yeah.
so I really tried to listen to that and watch and observe that and, reflect back and say, okay, I loved how Ken communicated. He always told me what came out of this meeting. He did this and this. He was a really strong communicator. For me, that's something that's really important as a leader. I want my team on the same page as I am as quickly as I can. So that we're all operating under the same context of assumptions as we sit and make decisions about how we want to go to market. And I think as I think about that personal brand for me, there's all sorts of templates that you can go out and look at on the internet that you can do your own little personal brand workbook. I strongly recommend everybody do that because it really forces you to sit down and say, what is your kind of power statement? What is it that you're really seeking to operate under? Does that align with your values? Does it align with your competencies? Maybe there's some areas that you need to go upskill. Some people might say, hey, my personal brand is I want to be an incredible speaker as one of the components, but maybe they're not yet. Well, go work and get the skills to be successful at that and build a plan to set you up for success. And the other thing I would say with a personal brand is you may have a perception of what your personal brand is, but go survey, go get questionnaires, anonymous, direct feedback, and ask people what they think their perception is of you. And how does that align with it? Because a lot of times as I mentor people, I think they find that those things, when they do that, aren't always exactly aligned. There may be some pieces that are, but not all. And so it's interesting when they hear that feedback of, oh gosh, I didn't realize I was blind to that. Or maybe people perceived that as a strength of mine. I didn't view it that way. So blend those together and figure out what it is you need to go to do to evolve there.
That's so important. And whether you're a retail associate manager or someone just starting out in leadership, you just gave about four or five just very, very practical things that you could do that you should absolutely do. I really especially love how you said that, you could perceive that something, about you is really powerful, but other people may, sometimes
Yeah.
that can be tough to hear. And you mentioned to me the other day that you still do that today at the vice president level, that you're constantly having conversations. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, there was a conference I went to a couple of years ago, and I love listening to those motivational speakers. I just like suck all that stuff in. And you and I talked about, I was like, I'm not much of a reader, but when I can hear somebody tell me and like consume that information, I just love to listen to that. And there was an author called, his name was Dan Pink, and his book is called Drive. And it's all about what motivates you. And he's done a ton with behavioral sciences and all of that. And I strongly recommend you go out and check out this video. It's called 2 Questions That Can Change Your Life. And it's out on YouTube under Dan Pink. And listen to this short, 2-minute video. But this video talks about how creating your statement or your sentence. And I'll be full disclosure, I'm still creating my sentence. And honestly, it's evolved even over a couple of years as I take different positions, as things change in my personal and professional lives. I continue tweaking it. But he talks a lot about how creating that statement or that sentence really gives you a way to motivate yourself and gives you a line of sight to what your goals need to be. And for me, when I heard that, I was like, gosh, it's so simple. Because I'm like, if I can get clear direction to that and what I want to do, then all that other clutter of what I'm trying to decide starts to blend its way out. And I found that it's helped people when they're trying to figure out what they want to do with their career, when they've been trying to figure out, what are their goals for their team. Maybe it's even something just on the personal level. Now, coming up with that sentence is hard because it's short. It's, every word matters. It's, what it is you want to do at the end of the day. But that video, I certainly can't do it justice, but it's really cool. It talks about how, JFK had an individual that was helping him. And she said, you know, John, you've got too much. You don't have a power statement. She's like, Abraham Lincoln had a power statement. His was to preserve the Union and free the slaves. It was very simple and
Very
clear, and
simple.
that's what
Yeah.
his direction was. For a teacher, it might be as simple as teaching 2 decades of children to learn to read. And it's as simple as that. Every day I'm going to come in and I'm going to teach these kids how to read. Sure, there's a lot of other things that I'm working on, but at the end of the day, it all hubs back into teaching the kids to learn to read. And so when I heard him say that, I have a little book that I have mine written down in, and I still every so often pull it out. In fact, I just found it the other day. When we packed up all our offices, I had to go find it again. But I'll go in there and I'll kind of edit some words or think about, what it is I want that sentence to be. And, for me right now, even as we become a new company, I'm like, I probably need to reset and just start mine all over again. Like, what is it I want to do for my next journey? So I think it's worth doing that. And I absolutely constantly am kind of reevaluating my brand, thinking about, how do I need it to evolve? How do I think about all the personal and professional elements that surround me that are evolving me as a leader?
Wow, that is awesome. I will drop that video title and book in the notes when we post this. So that's some outstanding advice. It's like I'm hearing less is more, and but it can be difficult to kind of pare it down because we've got some very talented people out there that have all these great attributes. So how do I pare that down and make it laser focused? I think it's a little bit unlike how we used to teach having an elevator speech for sales.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so, but it's an elevator speech more for yourself. I love that. It's fantastic. There was something really interesting I wanted to get into with you that you spoke about the other day. You are a really, really strong believer and proponent of mentoring, both having a
Yeah.
mentor and mentoring your team and even other people that aren't on your team. Katey, talk a little bit about why you feel that that's so important these days.
Gosh, I am a huge advocate, and I had so many people invest time in me when I started out, especially coming where I've only worked at Sprint and T-Mobile. I feel like, that has been a blessing, and it's also been something that's been a little bit of a hindrance, not having an opportunity to see a lot of different companies. But there were so many people that took time to teach me my role, to teach me how to operate in a large company, to just be a better leader. And like I mentioned earlier, sometimes it's people who may not even have realized that they were a mentor for me, but watching them, observing them, enjoying working for them. And then others I very consciously took time to set up coffees and lunches with and ask problem statements or work through a situation or a scenario with them. And still to this day, they remain, mentors and friends for me. I wanted to make sure I could give some of that back because I realized how valuable that was through every part of my career, no matter what transition I might have been in, whether I was just starting out, maybe I was moving to a manager role, maybe I was moving to a director role, or switching between, I talked about finance, marketing, pricing. Those are all very unique jumps and transitions within the organization that require a little bit of a leap of faith to do. Um, and it was a lot of those individuals that helped me do that, who had belief that I could make that jump, that, they knew that I could learn those skill sets. And so, I think for me, I want to make sure I can share that back with others too, because I don't think I would be where I am. I know I wouldn't be in my career if it wasn't for the help of those. And I also think it's, I think of them as mentors, and then I think it's important to have advocates too. They can be the same person, but I think you need groups of people in both. And those advocates are probably going to cycle throughout your career. People may retire, they may move on to new jobs, you may lose touch with them, and then you'll meet new advocates who become support mechanisms for you, whether it be in your company or whether it just be, in your career as a whole, because they might help you navigate to many other places beyond just the role that you're in.
Wow. That is outstanding, and it's so important. Why do we sometimes have leaders that feel like they have to put themselves on an island by themselves and
Yeah.
not be able to share, some of their fears, share some of their successes? Hey, how do I do this? It just helps so much. And I love that you're calling some folks advocates because we need that, right? We need people that's going to sing our praises as well. Katey,
Absolutely.
this has just been unbelievable. I have a couple more questions for you though.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, so now you mentioned earlier, you told me last week, you're not a big book reader, but tell us some other things that you do because you're very purposeful on how you develop yourself and your continued learning. What are a couple of things that you actually do?
Yeah, some of the things I love is I just started my audiobook. We don't have a commute anymore. And so I had been listening to a few TED Talks. I started that just before COVID happened. And they were about the perfect time. I could listen to half of it on the way into work and half on the way home and get through, a TED Talk pretty quickly. Um, but now I'm not driving to work. I'm sitting at my desk. So I haven't had as much time to do it. But now with my kids' commute to school, when I drive them to school, or when I'm out running errands, I've started a couple of audiobooks. In fact, the one I'm reading right now is Extreme Ownership, which is all about two Navy SEALs and all about the idea of, you know, being an owner, being accountable for anything and everything that impacts the deliverable or the outcome that you're seeking. Not laying blame or thinking of others, but knowing and influencing and having ownership to any element that can impact the outcome of what you're looking for. So I'm just getting started on that one. I'm anxious to hear kind of their thought process and story about how it applied in the real life to like me selling phones. It's very different, but they're like the logic really applies across the board. So I love the idea of the audiobooks. That has been fun. TED Talks were definitely something that I had started doing before because they're so easy. I listened to one on public speaking one day, which was really interesting. Just hearing how somebody went from like, you know, struggling with being in public to really being a motivational speaker. Because I'm like, gosh, how do people go from like that robust of a change in their skill sets? And so it's fun to hear the different stories. And I mean, there's a TED Talk and everything, I think. So that for me, for a person who doesn't, carve out the time to read or want to read, I think is really what I enjoy. And then, I love the short articles that you can go find on LinkedIn and Twitter and all that. The 5-10 minute reads, you get a lot from them because they're very punctual. They tell you the exact points. Dow Draper posted one the other day that I thought was really good on Twitter that talked about how we need more conflict in the workplace, meaning we need to debate and navigate to a better solution more often. If we just all say yes or we all agree, you don't know what you could have missed getting to a better outcome. So it was all about how do you create a healthy debate and dialogue in the workplace so that you can challenge each other's ideas in a way that fosters new thinking.
Yeah. Wow. I love that. And so you said something there without saying it that's really important. You're probably more of an auditory learner and a visual learner.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes I see leaders that try to force it that say, hey, I'm a big book reader. Do you really enjoy reading books though? Or would you rather watch the movie, So
Exactly.
yeah, I think that's great though, but you're doing stuff, you're constantly learning, and that's so important. Okay. Last question, and that I'm just picturing a leader out there that might be struggling a little bit, or a leader that doesn't quite know how to take that next step, that wants to maybe move into management, into leadership, or even a veteran leader that might be just struggling some. They've tried this, it didn't work. They tried this, it didn't work. What's two or three pieces of advice that you have for leaders out there, just in general today?
One of the things I would say when you think about your career, if it's something that you're struggling with of, gosh, what's my next step? I always tell people to think about, when you're looking to make your move, what's the move you're going to make 2 steps from now? So is that putting you on the path of really where you want to go? Maybe you don't know that, and that's okay. You might be in more of an exploratory phase of your career. I certainly, as I talked about my career, I went through a variety of different ones because I didn't know if I wanted to do marketing or operations, or I knew I didn't want to do finance. I learned that early on. But yet that breadth of skill earlier in your career gives you a chance to get that baseline knowledge and meet a lot of the people in the organization. And that applies no matter what role you ultimately go into. At a certain point in your career, you start to get to where you need to narrow in a little bit more. And that's where I think it's important to think about what is it that you want to do in two job level or two job skips, so that the one that you're taking is starting to get you on the path of where you want to go. I think is one piece of advice I would give. And then I would say too, don't be afraid to try something new. There's going to always be aspects of the job that you're going to say, you know what, I may not love that part as much, or I'm not as skilled, but man, all these other elements might be something that I think I've got a pretty good baseline for. Don't be afraid to try something new. That's where you're going to grow the most and really challenge yourself. And it may be hard. It may require you to get support from others. But that's where lean into those advocates, lean into the mentors, lean into your team. They can all help you learn. Certainly, when I've stepped into this role here at T-Mobile, I'm doing a lot with media, which is not something that I've historically had experience with. I mean, I'm used to working on the register at the store and thinking about how we activate the phone and the technical side of it. So the media for me was a huge jump of really learning that and understanding those. It's been a ton of fun learning it. It's been super challenging. And it's been a huge learning curve very quickly. But that's something I probably wouldn't have ever gotten had I not taken this role. But yet there's a whole set of areas that I am very comfortable and I can feel more confident in my day-to-day decisions. So it creates a little bit of a balance for you. If you get to the point that you're just really comfortable in what you're doing, that's probably a point at which you really need to start to ask yourself, am I ready for another challenge?
Yeah. Wow. Leaders, you got some nuggets here today. Katey, this has just been phenomenal. And I know how busy you are, so I want to first thank you for taking the time. And I have one last question. Can I possibly get you back later on this year and we
Yeah,
can go deeper into a couple other topics?
absolutely. I love it. What a cool idea to really establish this podcast. So I'm
Thank you.
excited to see, all the different topics out there and would love to come back. And, if anybody wants to reach out to, I'm happy to help, with any one-on-one questions as well as any follow-up for this is today's
Wow.
topic.
Thank you so much. That doesn't surprise me. I could just tell that you were just all about helping others
Yeah.
really reach their best. And thank you so much. So we're gonna wrap it up, folks. I don't know what else to say. This has just been phenomenal. But for now, this is Kenny and Katey with the Yak with Mac. We will be back next week. Thank you, folks.